had a missile launch. It's not known what type of missile it was, but it exploded on launch. President Trump has been briefed on the situation.
Vice President Mike Pence now in South Korea.
This is a guy we have to take seriously. He's seriously delusional, seriously crazy, and would seriously use whatever weapon he could get his hands on.
When he gets in positions like this, he starts to yell and make noise and try to intimidate people. And he's not going to intimidate this president.
Iran can buy from North Korea the next day whatever North Korea possesses. So it's two threats, Iran and North Korea.
Tempers flaring at dueling demonstrations for President Trump in California. And now at least 13 people are in handcuffs.
By going to the border this week, you sent a message to a lot of people.
This border is not open. If you come to America, come lawfully, don't come unlawfully. And that's already, I think, a huge factor in the decline in the attempts to enter America.
Sure, everyone.
We could have started with church music, but we started with Shining Star.
With Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's right.
Nice.
John Scott loves it.
Good morning to y'all. That's right. Happy Easter, America. Thanks for being here on Fox.
Yeah, what do you guys normally do on Easter morning? Because growing up, I think about my parents would do, they'd wake us up and the Easter Bunny would have come and we'd do an Easter egg hunt around the house, and I was one of 7 kids, so everyone just goes running and try to find their basket.
Yes, that's right.
And when you get it, it's like the best feeling ever.
Which is what I plan to do, too. It seems the bunny is here to greet us this morning, too.
But that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
Look, we've got our own. The Easter Bunny came to the Fox and Friends studio this morning.
And he's hiding eggs or try.
So if your kids
Really
have
hiding.
not yet had a visit from the Easter Bunny, he'll be over to your place as soon as he finishes
Oops,
here.
just dropped an Easter
He's
egg.
dropping them, and he's hiding them in really difficult places.
He's really busy.
On your
Obviously,
chair,
he's been
Abby.
working overnight.
You're right. He's sort of, at this point, he's over really trying to hide it.
Very
He's been
sneaky.
hiding so many eggs.
Yeah, I love Easter.
Kids, get up and find those eggs.
Yeah, it reminds me of, obviously, the Easter Bunny, but family time.
The bunny used to hide eggs in our backyard, but very often growing up in Denver, it would be snowing on Easter morning, so then the bunny would move inside.
The bunny would
like
the
our
bunny come
here.
in the chimney or through the
I never
basement?
did work that out, how the bunny got in, but
You
Gets
just
in
knew
any way
you
he
got
wants.
the end result of the candy.
That's right. That's right. Well,
So make sure you send us your photos, because everyone's got their own traditions, right?
Absolutely.
And the Easter Bunny obviously was here this morning, but is everywhere else. So we want to see what the Easter Bunny brought you.
and we want to thank Urban Stems for these beautiful flowers on set. So send us your
Smells good,
photos.
too.
It does. I didn't notice the smell till now.
That is right, John. It does smell
My
good.
allergies.
Yeah, so we hope you're all waking up to a beautiful morning and a happy Easter, but we do have, obviously, some news to get to this
That's
morning.
right. We have a Fox News alert from the atheist communist regime in the Korean Peninsula. Failure to launch. North Korea attempting to test fire another missile, but it blows up almost immediately.
Yeah, it is the latest move as the tensions boil over the country's escalating nuclear threat.
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. He has the latest on that for us. Griff.
Good morning, Abby, John, and Pete, and happy Easter. Just hours before Vice President Mike Pence landed in South Korea, a North Korean medium-range missile exploded seconds after an attempted launch from the East Coast port city of Sinpo. The blatant failure coming amidst high tension on the Korean peninsula. And moments ago, Vice President Pence commenting.
This morning's provocation from the North is just the latest reminder of the risks each one of you face every day.
Failure adds embarrassment for a regime who just yesterday celebrated their 105th anniversary with a massive parade of missiles and military might. Many wondered how the Trump administration would respond. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis issuing this statement, quote, "The president and his military team are aware of North Korea's most recent unsuccessful missile launch. The president has no further comment." The U.S. remains, of course, on high alert, and the USS Carl Vinson is positioned in the region as Vice President Pence begins that 10-day Asian trip. No comment so far from Pyongyang. Guys?
Griff Jenkins. Griff, thanks very much.
Thank you, Griff.
Well, the standoff sort of ends in a whimper. I mean, a failed missile launch from them yesterday, but certainly a sense that the pressure the Trump team has put on China and North Korea has recalibrated their calculations.
It's also not out of the realm of possibility that the United States may have had a finger in this. The New York Times had a fascinating article a month or so ago about efforts the United States has been making
The North Koreans have had a terrible record when it comes to these launches, and it is believed, some top secret measures that the U.S. and allies have been taking to make these rockets go astray. That's kind of fascinating.
That's the first thing I thought when I heard it, but you just never know.
You don't know, and I'm sure that nobody at NSA or CIA or any of those places is talking about it this morning, but it did not go well for the
But I think what it highlights is just the escalating tension that exists today, not just in North Korea, but now Iran is out there trying to flex their own muscles, saying, well, we don't really care what the U.S. has to say. We're going to build up our own military. This is from their President Rouhani, who says we will ask no one's permission to build up the armed forces and to build missiles and aircraft. Just to highlight, though, what President Trump is faced with at this very moment. It's not just North Korea. It's not just Syria, right? You've got Iran. Yeah. You've got China. That I mentioned this yesterday, but that continues to be, I think, the most important player here. They're the only ones that will be able to get North Korea's hands tied.
Yeah. And did you study how North Korea got to these bombs and these missiles? It's a preview of what it could look like in Iran. I mean, we signed the same kind of agreement with North Korea based on UN resolutions and sanctions and all the things we were going to do to prevent this regime. Right. They were hell-bent on getting missiles, and they did, and they ignored those agreements. In Iran, tell me that pursuit of ballistic missiles is part of the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA? Of course not. They're going to violate that agreement at every turn, and if they see excuses to do so, they will. So I think the Trump administration certainly paying attention to Iran. The world's most prominent state sponsor of terrorism says, we're going to build whatever we want. And it's clear they have intentions to get a nuclear weapon, too.
And, of course, they're like this with the North Koreans.
That's right. This whole axis of Iran, North Korea, Russia, I mean, this is an unholy axis. They're working together.
Not to mention, Vice President Mike Pence is, as we mentioned, with his wife Karen, in South Korea. He's going to be going to Japan as well, another incredibly important ally of ours over in that region. But I've been to Seoul in South Korea, and you can see the DMZ, the zone that's literally 30 miles off from Seoul, Korea. It's really eerie, and it's frightening when you actually can see that in person. You realize how close it is to South Korea, but also close to Japan. I mean, we just don't know what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you have to think about when you think about military options in North Korea. Is 15,000 missiles pointed at Seoul. That's going to be a city of 10 million people. That's obviously a consequence that things get ratcheted up.
But things have gotten a little rowdy here at home.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's go to the West Coast for a minute.
Let's go back here for a minute.
A free speech rally at Berkeley. And Abby, what happened?
Turns bloody, right? Angry leftists, they turn against the Trump supporters. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I
can't hear you. You're anti-American. I'm an anti-American? Yeah. You're stupid. I'm a patriot. Yeah. Oh, you little skinny American. I want to free America. I'll break the country. I want to. You want to fight? That's a really bad idea. Yeah? I don't think so. You get replaced, but you back down. I didn't stand up and fight you. How can you go there like that, get up and you take 4 steps back? I'll tell you what, one time done. I came out here because I'm a patriot. I'm a veteran in the United States Army, and all my brothers are here supporting our Constitution. How are you treated here by these people? Oh, like they treat everybody. They wanted to pick on me. I ripped the flag out of one guy's hand. I don't know if anybody saw that, but he was starting to burn it.
So that's a lot of beeps for your Easter morning.
Yeah, how many were there in that 1 minute soundbite?
If you didn't catch the front end of it, this was a veteran confronting one of these anti-fascist protesters, is what they call themselves, dressed in all black, always covering their face. I've been in some of these protests.
That's a mark of courage.
Yeah, big mark of courage from that tough guy. And big tough guy with his mouth covered looks at that vet and says, "You're anti-American. You're anti-American," which the vet doesn't take, too kindly to.
The man wearing the Army insignia on his hat with the flag on the side.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is in Berkeley, California. 20 people were arrested, I believe. 11 were injured. One person even stabbed from these. And here's what I always go back to with these protests, because I'm all for free speech in this country. I think that's what makes us
great.
That's
what they were protesting for.
What are they protesting, though?
No. The Trump supporters were protesting.
No, but the anti-protesters. I still can't figure out what they're trying to get at. What is their message? What are they protesting?
They're anti-fascists who want to shut down free speech, which doesn't make any sense at all.
And for so many of them, free speech is a great thing as long as you agree with them.
That's right.
And if you do not agree with them, then you
are not allowed free speech. It's
You know what my mom says about that, John?
What's that?
It's called conditional love. Right? And
That's
on
right.
Easter morning, I think we should be reminded of unconditional love. You
Yeah.
know, even if people don't agree with you, we don't need to turn violent.
Well, that's right.
not what we're about.
When they turned violent on you, what happened with those Trump supporters? They didn't come there for violence, but ultimately, when they were assaulted, they did fight back, and they pushed back these anti-fascists. They had them running down the street. I think one Trump supporter even gave them a wedgie. I'm serious.
I can't remember the last time I heard
saw
that
the
word,
photo.
Pete.
It's true. Well, that's what these punk.
What did the photo look like,
Punk
Pete?
kids of a big dude, burly dude, giving a punk kid a wedgie. But these anti-fascists, I mean, what do you expect? You don't really know what you're talking about. You're assaulting these people and the flag. You're burning flags. In fact, that confrontation with the vet was over potentially the burning of a flag. Yeah. This guy served his country for that flag, and he's looking at some punk kid wanting to burn it. I do the same thing.
You could see the look on his face. He was just blown away at what he was watching.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Really embarrassed.
Watching the country unravel in that sense in front of him. So.
Yeah. All right. I do want to bring you some other headlines this morning, starting with the U.S. condemning a violent blast in Syria, ripping through a bus depot, killing at least 100 people. Thousands of Syrian evacuees were at that bus depot fleeing rebel-held towns near Aleppo. Among the dead, government supporters, opposition fighters, and children, adding a new urgency to the chaos in that region. No one has claimed responsibility for that attack. And North Korea's escalating threat not deterring Vice President Mike Pence as he arrives in South Korea overnight. It's his first stop on a 10-day trip to the Asia-Pacific region, where he will hold talks on trade, economic, and security issues. The Vice President just moments ago sitting down to dinner with U.S. and South Korean troops after wrapping up an Easter church service. Earlier, his family joining him to lay a wreath at the Seoul National Cemetery. Vice President Pence is the son of a Korean War veteran and displays his late father's Bronze Star in his office. I love that. And just moments ago, Pope Francis holding a special mass at the Vatican to celebrate Easter Sunday. It's the day that Christians commemorate the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Tens of thousands of Catholics packing St. Peter's Square to hear the pontiff deliver his Easter message of hope. And a young Ohio State fan making a touchdown, the touchdown of a lifetime. Watch this.
And Jarvis gets away from Cooper. Jarvis plowing forward. Another missed tackle. He's making everybody miss. And Jacob Jarvis with a touchdown.
Is that not the best thing ever?
Did he dab it?
I love that. Jacob Jarvis giving the game's final carry, scoring the last points in the team's spring game. Jarvis, who has muscular dystrophy, has been a friend of the Buckeye program for years.
awesome.
He spiked
How
it at
cool
the
is
end.
that?
Super cool.
I love it.
Great.
Love it. All right, the mainstream media is furious at the White House for making visitor logs private.
That means, very simply, we will not know who visits the White House. This is a total break from precedent.
The Trump administration breaking from an Obama-era practice of making most of those records public through the White House.
The Trump administration. But is their outrage overblown? A reporter covering the White House, Caitlin Collins, is on deck.
Plus, what is the next foreign policy move for the Trump White House? Corey Lewandowski and Governor Mike Huckabee, they are both coming up.
And the American flag under attack yet again. One college just decided that hanging Old Glory is now optional.
Welcome back. Well, President Trump's administration has come under fire for keeping White House visitor logs quiet.
The White House announcing tonight that it will be keeping its visitor logs private. That means, very simply, we will not know who visits the White House. This is a total break from precedent.
The Trump administration breaking from an Obama-era practice of making most of those records public through the White House website.
This is basically saying, on the part of the Trump administration, that the nation's business is nobody's business.
It's not just about who comes in and out of the White House. It's about which individuals or groups might be trying to influence this administration on policy.
So is this reversal a shot at transparency, or are the media simply feeling snubbed once again?
Well, here to discuss is White House correspondent with the Daily Caller, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, good morning. Happy Easter to you.
Good morning.
So what do you think is going on here?
So this is overblown by the media. The hysteria over this is out of control because these visitor logs that Barack Obama made public in a push for transparency were never really that transparent after all. The president maintained the right to keep any name off the list that he wanted if it was a personal matter. So that means when Jay-Z came to the White House, his name didn't show up in these visitor logs. And they're also an imperfect record of who was there, because even if you had an appointment scheduled and you didn't show up, it still said that you were at the White House. So it wasn't like we really knew everyone who came to the White House during the Barack Obama years, But this was a chance for Donald Trump to one-up him in his transparency game, and he didn't take it.
Also, not a perfect record of who's trying to influence policy, because a lot of the meetings about, you know, what you're going to do with tax money and so forth, those don't take place at the White House.
Exactly. There's a dozen coffee shops nearby where people could go. But I would like to point out that when Mike Flynn and Jeff Sessions were under fire for meeting with the Russian ambassador to the United States, I decided to look through these White House visitor logs and see how many times he was welcome at Barack Obama's White House. And he was there. He showed up in the logs dozens of times. And Donald Trump tweeted out that story when Jeff Sessions was coming under fire for meeting him. So it was something that he liked then. But now they don't want to make them public, and we won't know who's welcome at his White House.
I was just going to say, could part of this be President Trump wanting to protect the people that come in to see him? You remember during the transition, people going in and out of Trump Tower. Steve Harvey comes to mind and just gets railed after by the media. Twitter goes wild.
Yeah, they're arguing that he has the right to, you know, keep these meetings private, who he's meeting with, judge nominations, etc. And that's their argument, that it's a national security concern.
But it's also true that in Washington, if you want to bury bad news or a story that you don't think is going to be particularly well covered, you do it on the Friday of a holiday weekend, which is exactly when this White House announced this.
Exactly. It's Good Friday. Yeah. No one was in town, and that's when they did it. And that's a little suspicious to people. They haven't even formally announced it yet. Everything so far has been from White House officials on background, and they haven't come out and said it. And when I asked Sean Spicer about it recently, when they would start releasing the logs, all he said was that they were reviewing the policy. He didn't say who was reviewing it and what the extent of that review was, but clearly they've made the decision not to release these.
All right, Caitlin Collins, good to have you here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, a failed missile launch and a total embarrassment for North Korea. But what is their next move? Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz and Gordon Chang here to discuss next.
Plus, the media claims there's a battle brewing in the White House between moderates and conservatives. But how true are those rumors? Trump insider and former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, he is here to break that all down.
Some quick headlines for you on this Easter morning. The Secret Service investigating now a liberal college professor for posting a disgusting tweet saying President Trump must hang. Lars Machik teaches at Fresno State University. He went on a violent rant on Twitter, also saying 2 Republicans should be executed for deporting illegal aliens. His Twitter account now deleted. And lethal chaos. Arkansas is determined to execute 7 inmates on death row as the courts are pushing back. The Attorney General appealing a temporary halt of the executions and wants the judge removed from the case. This after that same judge was seen at a death penalty protest the same day the stay was ordered. The state is rushing the executions before the legal drugs go off the market.
Thank you, John. Well, we've got a Fox News alert. North Korea attempted another missile launch, but it failed miserably. The botched attempt coming a day after an annual parade in Pyongyang, showing off its military might, and amid growing tensions between the U.S. and the Kim Jong-un regime. Here to tell us what Americans need to know about North Korea and this standoff is former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, as well as the author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. That's written by Gordon Chang. Thank you very much for joining this morning. Gordon, I want to start with you. Events in the last 24, 48 hours, has it changed? Is there any change you're seeing from the North Korean regime? What do you expect from them next?
I expect something provocative. And the reason is that they embarrassed themselves with this launch, which failed just a few seconds after it took off. And we got to remember that Kim Jong-un right now has a shaky regime. I think he has a low threshold of risk. This is incredibly humiliating for him. So he's got to strike out and do something. Another missile launch, maybe the detonation of that nuke that they buried in that mountain in northeast North Korea. So we will see something. I don't know what it will be, but it should probably occur pretty soon because Kim Jong-un wants to show strength.
Colonel Waltz, we've seen a new change or a turn from China, at least a little bit more pressure on North Korea. Is that working, or will the regime continue to lash out?
Well, Pete, I think it's important to note what didn't happen yesterday on the 105th anniversary of North Korea's founder, and that was the detonation of North Korea's 6th nuclear test. A lot of folks were expecting that. We saw a lot of activity around the test site, and it didn't happen, and we have to ask ourselves why. Well, a few things have gone on since President Trump met with President Xi at Mar-a-Lago. One, the Chinese rejected North Korean coal shipments. A number of ships were turned around. Two, the Chinese state-run agency said, which is often a mouthpiece for the Chinese regime, said, look, North Korea, if you detonate this nuclear test, we're going to stop selling you oil. And then three, we've had this kind of interesting back and forth between President Trump and President Xi, where they're essentially complementing each other. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of deal was struck at Mar-a-Lago? And we're starting to see the Chinese turn the screws to the North Korean regime. I think they've changed their calculus when President Trump said, look, China, take care of this or we will.
Sure. Gordon, that regime, Kim Jong-un, is this a guy who believes they have, robust military capabilities, or do they know ultimately they're fighting a losing hand and they're going to beat their chest to make themselves look and feel strong?
I think Kim Jong-un believes in his regime long term because most of the time, not now, but most of the time they have China at their back. It was very good that President Trump intimidated Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago with those missile strikes on a Chinese friend, Syria. And I think Xi Jinping leaned on Kim Jong-un not to test that nuclear device. But nonetheless, when we don't pay attention to China, when we don't put pressure on them, the Chinese will go back to their old way of doing things, which is supporting Pyongyang, because Pyongyang accomplishes some very important short-term objectives for the Chinese. So I think Kim Jong-un has figured out if he can get through this next 2 or 3 months, he'll be okay. And so that means that President Trump just needs to keep up the pressure.
Sure. Colonel Waltz, part of that pressure they've insinuated could include some sort of a limited military action. What would be the threshold for the U.S. taking a proactive measure?
Well, I think, as our intelligence collection capability starts to see North Korea march closer and closer and closer to having an intercontinental ballistic missile, then that's, at some point they're going to cross a line where we have to take it out militarily. During this parade that the North Koreans had yesterday, they showed off 2 new missiles. A lot of folks don't realize that they have a submarine-launched ballistic missile capability, and we saw some interesting new launch vehicles that can go off-road and can be hidden from our satellites, or at least make them a lot harder to find. So I think as we keep watching the regime and we see where they've crossed a threshold where they think we can hit us, we're going to hit them.
Well, interesting stuff. Colonel Waltz and Gordon Chang, thank you very much for your expertise this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Pete. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you, too. All right. Coming up, is there any truth to the rumors about a White House battle between moderates and conservatives? Trump insider and former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, there he is, here next. We might also get his thoughts on April the Giraffe, too. He's a fan. And Jimmy Fallon returns to host Saturday Night Live, so why are some members of the liberal media slamming his performance?
Have a seat at your new desk, and I'd like you to just fix everything, okay? If you need me, I'll be over here at my desk, okay?
Oh, gosh, that is me, Easter. My mom, of course, always put us in huge. If you think that bow is big, you should see what she would put us in other times. I think it's my head.
You don't look thrilled. What is going on? Is that your happy face?
My happy face, my Easter dress.
That's
my Easter bow.
Little Abigail Huntsman.
Everyone keeps sending us in your photos, so I can feel better about that photo of myself, because I know you all are going to dress up your adorable kids today in your bows and your dresses.
Send us your photos, friends@foxnews.com. We want old ones, we want new ones, we want funny ones, we want serious ones. Anything you got,
all of it. Yeah. And we're outside because it's beautiful.
All Easter, all the time this morning.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, let's bring in Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager of President Trump. Corey, good to have you here.
Good morning. Happy Easter.
I do want to start with giving you the latest update on April the Giraffe, because you've been with us this entire journey. April was born yesterday. 1.2 million people watched this birth. April gave birth. Right. Yes. And
did you watch it?
The mainstream media can now rest once again. Thank goodness.
They just haven't covered it sufficiently, so we've had to cover it for them.
Yeah, and we want to make sure you were aware, because I know you've been on top of this one.
I've been worried about this.
Yes.
This and Kim Jong-un are the 2 biggest issues for me. Now we got one solved.
Yeah. All right. Well, to some real news. As you've been following as well, the media seizing on reports of a battle between conservatives and moderates inside the White House. Steve Bannon versus others. What's going on?
Look, I think what the media doesn't want to look at is that anybody who is not on the president's agenda should not be there. And what I mean by that is if you don't support the president 100%, then you're not just doing the president a disservice, but you're doing the country a disservice if you're serving inside the White House. So the president wants to achieve repealing and replacing Obamacare and cutting taxes and making sure we stop illegal immigration. We saw the Jeff Sessions interview last night with Judge Jeanine. He outlined that very articulately about what the president's agenda is as it relates to illegal immigration. So if there's anybody in that White House, whether you're a conservative, a moderate, or you want to be considered a liberal Democrat, I don't care who you are. If you're not on the president's agenda, then you shouldn't be there. It's very simple.
So there are concerns, though, Corey, amongst conservatives that the influence of conservatives is waning and others are gaining more influence. Can you give us any insight into that, or is it really just about serving the president?
It's all about serving the president, and let me be very clear. The president is the person who drives the agenda inside the White House. It's not anybody else. When the president has a desire to get something accomplished, he's the one who's moving that forward. Now, does he take advice and counsel from people from all political spectrums? Of course he does, but that's the way he's always run his business, and that's the way we ran the campaign. And so as he looks at what is the most important thing to move forward, and that's repealing and replacing Obamacare, it's cutting taxes, we see that he takes a holistic approach, and he takes input from as many people as possible so that he can get the results that he demands.
But there are questions about the president's agenda. He had a great week, obviously. A lot of positive press after the strike in Syria and the dropping of the Moab bomb. But the journalists who cover the White House are calling him flip-flopper-in-chief, saying, you know, NATO was bad during the campaign. Now NATO is good. Russia was sort of good during the campaign. Now Russia is bad. Is that a change in attitude on the part of the president?
Well, it's more of a change in attitude from the mainstream media. You know, it's amazing that they want to attack him all the time, but then when he does things that they actually agree with, and these are the things that Barack Obama refused to do. You know, as you know, we saw that John Kerry, the former attorney, the former Secretary of State, came out and supported the strike in Syria because that Barack Obama didn't have the wherewithal to draw a line in the sand and stand to it. And so the media has no choice now but to actually support this president on his swift and decisive military action. It's something that they should be supportive of. And look, here's what the president has said. He will do anything it takes to rid our nation and the world of ISIS. And that's why he dropped that bomb in Afghanistan. He made that pledge during the campaign, and this is a fulfillment of a campaign promise.
Yeah, killing up to 100 ISIS terrorists. Corey, it's Easter morning. What are your plans today?
Oh, look, I'm so excited. We're actually going to Easter brunch at the Trump Hotel today. Very excited. And then tomorrow's the Easter egg roll, and I brought my kids to Washington just to participate. So very exciting time.
Ah, very cool.
That
I believe our own Ainsley Earhart will be there tomorrow as well. So you should make sure to say hi to her on the White House lawn.
Thank you.
Corey, good to have you.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it.
All right, now I want to bring you some other headlines, starting with a major break in the horrific murder of a young jogger who worked for Google. Police in Massachusetts arresting Angelo Ortiz. He's accused of brutally attacking Vanessa Marcotte last summer and leaving her body in the woods near her mother's home. Well, state troopers spotting Ortiz's vehicle in Massachusetts, then linking his DNA to the crime scene. Ortiz is expected to face murder charges. And more trouble for United Airlines, emboldened by the airline's passenger dragging scandal. A former beauty queen is now suing that airline over a flight incident back in 2013. Former Miss Venezuela Carmen Monatel claims that she was wrongfully handcuffed and dragged to the back of a plane after getting into a fight with her now ex-husband. Monatel was charged with assault, but her case was dismissed when a court found her not guilty. She is now seeking an unspecified amount of damages. That story just will not end, will it?
Yeah.
Well, the Washington Post, they are not happy with Jimmy Fallon.